Welcome all to the panel session on strengthening supplier relationships in today's business environment. This is, I think, one of the most relevant subjects we could be discussing today, because from beginning of the year, we have gone through changing and uncertain times, and I should say unprecedented times. So we have got eminent panelists with us who will be describing about their experiences in their organization. To start with, my name is Lalit Dhamija. I am Global Procurement and Supply Chain Trainer, and I am a Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supplies Direct Associate. I request panelists to briefly introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Ghazala Ilyas. I head up direct sourcing for First Abu Dhabi Bank.
Okay.
This is Ahmed Alrayyes. I'm looking after the sourcing contracts and supply chain for EITC that includes Do and Virgin Mobile.
Okay. Sulaiman. I think Sulaiman is muted. Maytham, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Maytham Al Khairulla. I'm responsible for supply chain and procurement at OSN, pay TV operator based in Dubai, but we serve customers across the MENA region.
All right. Okay, Sulaiman.
I am Sulaiman Abdulla, Head of Procurement and Contract in Telecommunications Regulatory Authority in UAE.
And shortly, we'll be joined by Ms. Bernadette Ryan. She is Senior Purchasing Manager, MENA region for Jaguar Landrover. Now, what we are going to do today is, as I told you before, we are going to talk about each organization, about their journey, how they went through right from the beginning of the year till now, and what were their experiences as far as the supplier relationships are concerned. And I believe there'll be a lot to learn from their experiences. Also, we will have a poll near the end, and you are encouraged to write your question and answers in the chat section. And also, if you want a particular supplier to reply, you can write their name against the questions. So, and the questions and answers will be taken at the end, 10 minutes before the end. So we are encouraged to write the questions as we go on, and the poll will be also in the later half. So we start now. I invite Ms. Ghazala Ilyas, Vice President and Head of Sourcing, Technology, Strategic Vendor Management from First Abu Dhabi Bank. Ms. Ghazala.
Thanks, Lalit. Good afternoon, everyone that's attending. So for us, it's been an extraordinary year, as it has been for all of us. I think what happened for us at the start of the pandemic, we were obviously we're a very customer-focused organization, and our first priority was making sure that our branches and our ATMs were properly equipped with the right PPE equipment, whether that was sanitizers, gloves, biosuits, masks, etc. And then to make sure also that the safety of our employees was paramount, and also our third-party resources that support us. And within technology, we have a number of resources that support us from India. So first of all, in terms of our service providers in India, they had to very quickly start working from home. And what we were able to do was to make sure that they had the correct connectivity in order to provide us with seamless services. So there was no interruption in services, both internally and externally. And I have to say our IT really stepped up, and our support partners really stepped up and provided us with really great solutions. They didn't insist on contracts to be dotted and signed on the same day. They gave us some flexibility. In fact, they were pushing us to assist more. So I think that was really good for us to see in terms of the strategic relationships we've created with these vendors over sort of the past, years. So that really came to fruition, certainly in terms of establishing a safe and secure environment in India, where our service providers are an extension of FAB. Next, within the UAE, as I mentioned before, when we're looking at the provision of safety equipment and services, we were quite surprised. We went to our strategic vendors and one of them at least tried to increase their prices, which was quite disappointing actually, because we had previously enjoyed a very good relationship with them. And we thought that, for the provision of masks and sanitizers, which we needed very quickly, especially around branches and ATMs, that they would step up. And unfortunately, they chose a different path. So I guess then we were forced to look at some of our vendors that we either didn't use or that were on our supplier list, but that we hadn't engaged with. And we were greatly heartened by the response that they gave us, especially one vendor that we had to hardly use. They really stepped up. They provided us with all the necessary equipment that we needed within days. They offered to help us in all our markets. So we are in 18 countries. So they offered to go through to their partners within other countries to really support us. And I think as a result of that, it allowed us to restructure and review our sort of strategic relationships and understand that it's actually the partners that help you through crises like these are the ones that should be rewarded. And, we extended that out. So we asked for extended payment terms as well. Our business suffered a lot, and if our business suffers, then our suppliers' business will suffer. So the ones that really supported us were the ones that were very flexible. They extended payment terms. They were able to provide us with free of charge services. For example, when we requested that we reduce manpower because we did not need as much manpower as our staff started working from home, they were very flexible towards it, and they took a very long-term view because they knew that the relationship with us would be longer term if they supported us through this, unprecedented event. So what that has resulted in now is that, we constantly look at ways of rewarding these vendors that have supported us. Now, as a semi-government owned organization, we are bound by lots of rules and regulations. So this does not mean that we compromise the integrity of the RFP process. But what it means is that we're looking at certificates of appreciation to vendors that have supported us. We're allowing vendors to have a platform whereby they can demonstrate their new ideas and their innovation that they believe will help the bank moving forwards. And that is very, that is something that vendors have often said to us, that we just don't get enough time with the right people to showcase our new technologies or our new innovations. So that has been a really positive one for us. And I think that, sort of finally, if we look at e-signatures, it was a very sort of hot topic and not one that was really on the cards before the pandemic. And as a result of this, we have really accelerated, the e-signatures, and, we will be launching that shortly. We've had a number of hurdles to get through, but I'm glad to say that, we are finally looking at sort of streamlining that whole supply chain process, and it helps us, and again, it helps our vendors. So I think in summary for us, the relationships that we thought would hold the test of time, some of those sadly didn't, but the ones that helped us showed us true flexibility, true collaboration. And they didn't seek to maximize profits throughout that whole process. What they sought to do was to give us an extension of the services we needed for them in a timely manner, so that our customers did not suffer, and more importantly, our staff didn't suffer, because we hold staff safety at the highest levels, and our vendors, certainly our strategic vendors, are an extension of our staff. So I would say it's a really eye-opening sort of set of events.
Yeah, good to know. So you entered into a flexible type of relationships, and you liked the suppliers who had a long-term view, who were flexible, who provided some of the services which were beyond the scope, and some of them free of charge. And you also mentioned you were depending on strategic suppliers, but at times you did not get their services as per your expectations. But then there are others who were not even on the list, but who helped you. And you are in 18 countries, with especially with PPE and sanitizers.
Yeah.
So how easy was it to get the new suppliers? Did you need any approvals, or did like how will you regularize such activities?
So we had at least 2 suppliers already on our sort of pre-qualified supplier list. It's just we hadn't used them because the commodities that we were getting, we felt if we consolidated them in 1 or 2 strategic suppliers, we would get better better savings.
Okay.
So for that, it wasn't a problem. So one of them was not on our list at all. So we had to get exceptions approval. Now, the good thing for procurement is that we were very well represented on our business continuity committee, which looked after, and still does, looks after all aspects of making sure the bank's operations carry on in spite of the pandemic. So, we had a very streamlined process which allowed us to onboard vendors where we sort of shortcut the normal due diligence to get them on board because there was an actual business requirement. And the use of a sort of a consolidated committee and having procurement presence on that really assisted us, so that we were able to look at all aspects of the bank's operations and where we needed to get suppliers mobilized very quickly. So that really supported us.
Okay. Did you find any gaps in the procedures or in processes which were not in place to take care of any uncertainties which you faced, or something new behavior you wanted and which was not catered for in earlier procedures or processing or structure?
Yeah, look, I mean, as a bank, we are highly regulated, and that goes, due diligence and risk is key, is paramount to the way we operate. And that extends to our suppliers. So yes, there was, when we're trying to onboard suppliers very quickly, you don't necessarily have all the time, the luxury of time to be able to, to do every single aspect of the due diligence. Yeah. We created a sort of a soft onboarding process, which allowed us to just take the names, the trade licenses, and sort of bare fundamentals of suppliers to get them onboarded, with the with the assurance that the background due diligence that was required would happen in parallel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ghazala. We had a very good view about FAB, how you went through the journey till now during these from the beginning of the year. And maybe like in procurement and supply, we've got cross-industry best practices. I'm sure participants and people from the audience, they will, of course, learn something from this and from other speakers. And maybe we can use some of these good practices which were successful for you. Thank you. Now, at this moment of time, I invite Mr. Ahmed from DO to share his experiences with us. I know all of us are now working more from home, or using more computers, more internet, and more digitalization effort is there. So I am sure there was more requirements of services of DO. And let us hear from Mr. Ahmed, how did they cope up with their suppliers, and how did they went through this journey? Mr. Ahmed.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. So as you have mentioned, I mean, for the telecom sector, for us in AITT, DO and Virgin, and our colleagues as well from the other telecom operator as well, I think Sulaiman knows that the responsibility for on the telecom operators during that kind of pandemic towards the society was a bit big, We have been taking the responsibility to ensure the connectivity between people between organizations, schools, and so on during a full lockdown. I would remind people during that kind of lockdown where people were not able to leave their homes and so on, and that was not something that is easy. You know that maybe in the media and so on, the telecom operators have been taking the credit, but I think the suppliers who were behind us and behind the other operators as well, they should have taken some certain credit towards that, because it was kind of a full ecosystem on how we have done these things. I think what we have experienced and what we have went through during that pandemic in terms of a strategic relationship and support of the suppliers and partners was not something that you can build it at such short notice. That was kind of a result of how this kind of partnership and relationship management has been happening across the years and years back. And it was a good test during a difficult time to see these kind of things. And during that kind of lockdown, nobody was able to even guess about, will this continue forever, for months, for weeks, or a couple of days, and so on. So having this kind of relationship and a support, people get selfish during that time. So before I speak about our own experience, we have started by forming a steerco across our organization. Sourcing had one of the chairs in that kind of a steerco. We were responsible for anything related to third-party communication and support and so on. We have immediately activated an emergency procurement policy in which the delegation of authority flexibility has been given to the sourcing personnel with the proper working at that and reporting, because things had to be decided on a spot. And then we had categorized our suppliers. The segmentation was not the regular segmentation that we used to have, like a major, a strategic, and so on, but that was more of category that was about the suppliers who have their own personnel working in our premises, whether that was onshore and offshore. We categorized them, and how that kind of a protocol of safety, of communication, attending to office, not attending, and the reporting of any certain incident that happens in our partners, whether back offices or through one of their personnel that are working in our case. For the offshore ones as well, we had, we have a couple of call centers across different places worldwide. So we were not just monitoring about the regulations during the pandemic of the UAE, but even the other remote countries where we are being serviced from. There were some certain places where services centers that are servicing us, like call centers, have been fully locked down. People were not able to, or our agents were not able to reach their offices. We had to activate some certain protocols to get them connected to our systems through their homes. That was in Egypt, in India, and Philippines, and some other places as well. Then we had the category B was the suppliers that would have an interruption on the services that they provide, or some certain services that will not be required anymore during that period. I'm talking about facility management, I'm talking about the cleaning and so on, where we were not able to be at office, or even the ones that are providing some certain services in our retail shops across the shopping malls and so on, where, these have been stopped. There are some certain companies that took this as an opportunity of cost saving and stop all the invoices. And we know that most of our contracts now is SLA based or task based and not kind of a commitment. However, we have felt that we have a commitment, a responsibility towards these personnel who are their services are not needed during that period, but we cannot just leave them. So we had some certain mutual agreements with these suppliers to agree on some certain minimum fee that we pay in order to secure that kind of a group of people who are servicing us, in order to be available once we are over that pandemic and we don't go for again hiring and training and so kind of things. And this can have supported financially the organization and not to face any kind of cash flow. Then we had the category D, which which was maybe the most important, where we had the supplies that we need from them an immediate supply. Talking about not only just supply of goods or the sanitizers and so on, but I'm talking about expanding our networks. So, just for information, during the pandemic, we had the traffic in our network have doubled in the first week. and we had 300% increase in some certain application uses related to the remote learning. We had 70% increase on some certain as well mobile network. You know, it was not something easy. So we had to have our suppliers and our network partners to react immediately in terms of expanding our network, in terms of doing all of that. And we have to remember all of that was happening. Sometimes orders were over phone call. So there is no formal official commitment, PO or something like that. And it's about the trust. No certain supplier would do this if we don't have that kind of a trust. And as well to thank them for that. When it comes to the sanitizers and so on, maybe people would take it as a joke, but one of the suppliers that we have secured the sanitizer for were a telecom network, or international telecom operators, network operators worldwide. That they have helped us. It was not selling us; it was sharing their stock that they had it through one of the embassies with our. Overall, I think what we have learned is, number one is that in terms of our SRM and the segmentations of our suppliers should not be any more about the value of spend and the service security that they provide. But that kind of sustainability support and so on would need to be a major criteria in our suppliers segmentation and scoring and performance evaluation. The second thing is that it was really a proof. What does partnership mean? It was not about what we have been talking and hearing and reading about across different conferences or books or theories or something that people would feel about it. So this is something, and just on a nutshell about how was we our do and the version experience in the supplier.
And Ahmed, if you want to reward the suppliers who lived up to your expectations, or who went beyond your expectations, how do you think DO can reward such suppliers?
Well, I think is not only about the reward. It's you know, it was bilateral. Let's say from both sides. The support was from both sides, us and them. But it's kind of a proof that really we should not continue. We as a procurement keep looking into these suppliers as a place where you should negotiate the best price from them and just push negotiations and so on. Relationship is important, right? Where there's money doesn't make any difference anymore at some certain times and so on. So relationship is important. How we reward is really the trust and the communication going forward, and considering the difficulties and challenges that they may have, putting yourself in the other partner position and vice versa as well. This is what we have to. Reward-wise, at the end is continuation of that kind of strong partnership relation.
All right. Before you go, Ahmed, you mentioned about cleaning services. Some of the services were discontinued or tapered down a bit. So you said you had some type of arrangement so that they could sustain. So briefly, in the next 20 seconds, if you can tell us.
So there were some number of contracts. There were task-based, where the charging is based on a certain activity or a task that is being done every single day. And because everything was locked down, so these services were not provided or were not required. So the supplier had to charge us as per the contract. However, at the same time, he have a certain cost towards staff salaries, their accommodations, some certain things and so on. So if we were at that time not to pay, simply he will not be able to handle that kind of cost, and he will let go all these kind of resources. And once the lockdown is over, then we would have to go back again and start hiring, recruiting, explaining the culture of our company towards the partner supplier. So we came to a certain arrangement where we have agreed that although it is not our responsibility across the contract, but we are willing to pay a certain fee during that kind of lockdown every single week. That will cover his minimum cost, at least to cover some certain cost, to retain these people and to have them as well able to continue fulfilling their day-to-day costs for even the resources, so they keep their salaries as well. And once over that kind of pandemic, it's just on.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. Really well educated with that type of arrangement. And now I invite Mr. Maytham. Khairulla, who is a VP Procurement and Business Support from OSN. Mr. Maytham, you got 3 to 4 minutes, and we really want to know your journey. What were the salient features? What were the main points?
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. I think our experience has been quite similar to the experience that Ahmed has just described from a telco perspective. OSN being a home entertainment business, we've seen a very big increase in viewership as customers were locked down in their homes and desperately looking for entertainment. We've reported a 900% increase in viewership during the lockdown period. And that obviously presented us with opportunities and challenges at the same time. I think the first opportunity that it presented is we also launched Disney Plus during that lockdown period. And that obviously was, welcome news for a lot of kids and children staying at home and, looking for entertainment as well. But at the same time, COVID-19 meant that some of the productions have been delayed from Hollywood and the studios because obviously, the lockdown and the restrictions around COVID. So luckily, usually the production cycle goes over, several months. So in the immediate aftermath of COVID, we still had a lot of new and fresh content coming in from studios. However, toward the end of this year and beginning of next year, this is when we'll see some of the impact. So what we've done to mitigate that impact is we increased our OSN originals, and these are productions that we do in-house in the region, in Arabic predominantly. And we've also started introducing movies and content from other places in the world. So for example, now we've introduced a South Korean series, which is again, in this region, it's not very familiar, but South Korea is one of the leading production houses globally. And we've also introduced some Russian content, some other European content, and so on. The other challenge that we had is because of the increase in consumption, we needed to import more setup boxes, dishes, cables, and other installation materials, which we usually get from East Asia. So some of them come from China, and they were obviously impacted with the lockdown earlier on in February, which coincided with the Chinese New Year. So they went into the Chinese New Year, and then the lockdown happened. And it also coincided with Ramadan, which is the peak viewership period here in the region. So we had to obviously, cater for a lot of the relationships that we've built with suppliers over time to ensure that we get the first lot of productions after they resumed operation. But then the challenge became not only getting the production done, but actually shipping the production with the shortage of containers globally and the fact that a lot of containers were stuck in Europe and North America, and they were not in East Asia. So I remember we had to air freight some boxes to Egypt because of the very high demand. And again, air freighting boxes was a challenge because most of the air freight cargo used to go in passenger planes, and most of those passenger planes got canceled. So we to secure enough cargo space, we had to send various flights, and it had to go through Turkey, for it to land in Egypt. So I think, in general, it has been quite a good and challenging experience. Obviously, you had to rely on the good relationship you had with suppliers because all of them are declaring force majeure. So, there is no legal ground for, any discussion. It had to be on good terms. And I think we also had quite interesting discussions with our commercial finance team, because as you know, the concept before was you need to have low stock and just on time stock. But when you have a COVID situation like that, that concept is almost blown out of the window. And now it's all about market share and maintaining your market share and ensuring that you have the goods in the market on time to benefit from that opportunity. We also deliver our channels through an application, and the application, obviously customers use their own devices, mobile phones, tablets, but we also had to interact with our CDN providers and our telco partners to ensure that they dedicate, more bandwidth to our content with that 900% increase in viewership. So I think, everyone came on board to ensure that, things continue running and, as I said, sometimes out of difficult situations, opportunities show up as well.
Thank you. Very good snapshot of what you went through, and good to know 900% increase in viewership and how you managed to get new set-top boxes and new partners and new language programs, or at least I know nowadays we are viewing from many countries, but they are dubbed, or we have got the subtitles. So that is increasing the viewership. Thank you, Mr. Maytham.
Thank
and
you.
we'll continue and we'll have a number of questions during Q&A session. All right.
Thank
now
you.
I invite Mr. Sulaiman Abdulla from Telecommunication Regulatory Authority. Mr. Sulaiman is Manager, Contracts and Procurement. And you got 3 minutes, Mr. Sulaiman.
Thank you, Lalit. Good afternoon, everyone. And I think my colleagues have shared so many elements were really valuable, and then I will add some important points. And I think in TRA, and I think COVID-19 had raised the importance of supplier collaboration and relationship. Really, it was very important. And I think when we started and I think in any organization, there is a BCM committee. So first thing we have done is onboarded the BCM committee, and BCM committee has different stakeholders, and we were, as a procurement and contract, part of that committee. So the first point as a procurement function we have done is review the strategy. Now, when we're saying review the strategy, does not mean that the whole 30 pages strategy need to be reviewed. It can be only a single page of a strategy, what procurement needs to do in COVID-19 and what initiatives we need to do. This is one. We activated, as Mr. Ahmed, my colleague, has mentioned, activated the emergency policy purchase, which included 2 parts. One, you can go ahead as a direct award when any pre-qualified suppliers that exist in your supplier list, and delegation of authority, which gives more flexibility to the committee to take an approval and proceed with any kind of requirement. I think the important point it comes is when you review the contract. I think the third step we have taken is we have focused on our strategic contracts and started communicating with our suppliers to negotiate with them. When I'm saying negotiation, it's not only about cost. One of the elements we have considered that the services get disturbed, so we need the services to be provided offshore. We don't need the services to be provided on site. Now, that itself, while negotiating with the suppliers, really add value in cost reduction. That's one part. Second point, when discussing with the suppliers, we also rescheduled the payment terms. And when we're talking about payment terms, we are not talking about postponing the payment terms. We also negotiated with the suppliers, speeding up the invoices and the payments from 30 days to 15 days, because we understood that the impact of the economy and society is very important to be considered in order to sustain, in longer run. A third point is we have classified our services in the 3 elements. The services which being disturbed fully, 100%, services being disturbed partially, and services which is not being disturbed, and we can reschedule and rescope those services. And I think, as Mr. Ahmed mentioned, one of the services being disturbed is the cleaning services or whatever. We're talking about facility management services. And also we have taken the same steps that Mr. Ahmed mentioned about securing these kind of suppliers and contracts, because at the end, after 3 months or 4 months or 6 months, if I go and onboard the new suppliers, the costs will be more high. So a fourth point we have considered, as my Maytham colleague has mentioned, shifting from just-in-time methodology of inventory to inventorizing the items, especially when we want to secure the equipment of the requirement. Last point I have to consider is, to be honest, last point to be considered is, to be honest, is rewarding the suppliers. And I think we have taken good initiative by rewarding our suppliers, providing them with appreciation certifications. And when we reward the suppliers, I think we give them also a time to explain and express their ideas and way of thinking, how they thought about this COVID-19 and the level of support that they have got from TRA especially. And I think Lalit is very important when it comes to supplier relationship management. The more you collaborate with suppliers, the more you introduce the win-win approach, the value will sustain more and more and more.
Thank you, Sulaiman. We came to know some interesting points about like speeding up payments, and also how you have rewarded the suppliers, and also secured the services. Even you did not require, you had a long-term view of that. Yeah. Now, thank you. And what we will do now, we have reserved the best for the last, which is Miss Bernadette Dayan. She is from Jaguar Landrover, and she is Senior Purchasing Manager, MENA. But before she starts, what I will like to do is, I will start to initiate a poll. I want to initiate a poll, and till the time our participants are doing the poll, and when they're participating in the poll, I'll take 2 or 3 minutes to read it. And after that, Ms. Bernadette will start, and later during the end, we will share the results of the poll. So audience, and if they even panelists if they like, they can visit the chat section. In the chat section, there is a poll section. So you can participate in the poll by going to the poll section. So there, we will start the poll. There are 3 questions. So you have to read on, and you have to answer all the 3 questions. So I'll read the first one, which you can attempt at the chat section. When you go, there is a poll a group there. So in the poll, you can participate in the poll. So the first question is, amidst all the changes and uncertainties this year, what has been the biggest challenge you have experienced when sourcing materials, services for your organization? So we've got some options here: excessive lead times, material or services unavailability, transportation, freight forwarding issues, lack of manpower or increased cost, contractual issues, lack of supplier cooperation, or loss of business. So you have to select one which has been the biggest challenge for you. So when you go after this to the next question, it will be to ensure, this is the question 2, to ensure business continuity, what was the most important action taken by your business? Advancing payments to suppliers, extending payment period for suppliers, revising contract terms and conditions, switching suppliers, using local suppliers which are available locally, helping suppliers to survive, or asking for discounts. So this is question number 2. And the last question, number 3 in the poll is, how would you reward suppliers that went the extra mile to support your organization? So the choices are assurance of future business or new contracts, public recognition during honor ceremony, references or testimonials, or some PR rewards, appreciation letter to senior management, a joint buyer-supplier collaboration plans, preferred supplier listing, or preferred payment terms. So these three questions are there. So you have to select one out of one of the choices from each. And we will see the poll results after Ms. Bernadette Ryan from Jaguar Landrover. She has told us about her journey, what she went through, these uncertain times, what their organization went through, and what were the best practices. So what were the good practices which they found? You got 4 minutes, Ms. Bernadette. Please start.
Thank you, Lalit. Thank you very much. And thank you to all my colleagues. It was really very interesting and some great points made. I think probably for Jaguar Land Rover, our problems might be maybe the opposite problems to those experienced by DO or by OSN, because where you had a bigger audience and more work on your plate and more people to satisfy, for us during a lockdown, people aren't getting out and about, they're not getting out, they're not buying cars. And if they're not buying cars, we're not taking in money. So for us, it was more problem solving, firefighting. And I think in the wake of a big event like COVID, the temptation is really to react. And I think the whole way we approached it in purchasing was to try and move away from a reactive type of strategy onto a more strategic thinking, to make a strategy that focused on being dynamic, being flexible, moving with the times, moving with the problems. And really, I suppose when you look at this situation, being unprecedented, it was taken every day as it comes and dealing with new issues. So I think our strategy, in a lot of ways, dealing with both big suppliers and smaller suppliers, as everybody I think so far touched on, and it was one of the really important things, was payment terms. So it was not only to arrange better payment terms for ourselves with our bigger suppliers who could maybe afford to wait, but it was also about having regular contact with all of our suppliers and finding out what their issues were, and with the smaller suppliers, maybe trying to give them better terms, pay them more promptly to ensure that they would stay afloat. We're part of Jaguar Land Rover UK, and here in the Middle East, we actually support retailers from 20 different countries around the Middle East. So we were dealing with a lot of smaller suppliers, a lot of currencies, a lot of different issues. And I think supplier relationship management meetings were probably the most important thing that we implemented. And I say that because it allowed me to speak with my suppliers on a weekly basis, touch base with them, find out what was happening. And then the strategy being to be able to move to accommodate them where necessary, or maybe to ask them to accommodate us where was necessary. So I think, like everybody else, it was really about dealing with new situations, but also finding ways to be flexible, to be a dynamic organization in 2020. And again, I suppose the other thing, we did implement things like bringing our smaller suppliers into our offices and allowing them to use our technology to deliver training out to our retailers, and do things like that we could do during lockdown, where people weren't coming into showrooms or people weren't coming here to be trained. We could still deliver that training. So yeah, it's I think, as well as the supplier relationship management meetings, putting KPIs in place to measure where we were getting to with those meetings was pretty important. Setting benchmarks and knowing where we were and how suppliers were performing against those benchmarks allowed us to look at it as an overall picture and see where we needed to do more or to be more supportive, let's say. And I think the whole thing, what came out of it all, was the importance of supplier partnerships. And like Ahmed mentioned, and I think Sulaiman also touched on, was collaboration, partnerships and collaboration. And if nothing else, I think COVID showed us how important it is to develop good, strong relationships with our suppliers, and how important these things are when, you know, when all else fails or when we're all in a hard spot. So that was our learning, I think, for JLR.
Thank you, Bernadette. And so you're emphasizing more on supply relationship meetings, and you got opportunity to have weekly meetings, because otherwise you'll be traveling physically. So here you were having advantage of working digitally, online.
Yeah, we had the ability to work from home, you know, as
from
we
home
spoke
itself.
about the last day with, you know, putting in the extra time and extra capabilities. We all had the opportunity to work from home and to stay in contact with our suppliers. So, you know, it was all new learning, and again, emphasis on supplier relationships, partnerships, and flexibility, I think, from both sides.
Thank you. Thank you, all the panelists. Now, I will request the platform to release the poll results. So we will see the poll results and then wrap up. So we are nearly ending the time, nearing the time. So let us see the poll results. So I can read them for you till the time they come on the screen. The first question was, amidst all the changes and uncertainties this year, what has been the biggest challenge you have experienced when sourcing materials, services for your organization? So the biggest challenge, as per the responses, what we have received is 42% people say excessive lead time. That is the mostly one. The excessive lead time is the one which is the biggest challenge. The second one, how would you reward suppliers that went the extra mile to support your organization? So here, 31.6% people say assurance of future business or new contracts, and the same number say preferred supplier listings. And when we go to the third one, it is to ensure business continuity. What was the most important action taken by your business? So here, the most rated point is using local available suppliers. So using local available suppliers was the recourse taken by most of the organizations, people who are attending this session. So most of them used locally available suppliers. And that was the poll results. And thank you everyone for your contribution. We had an insight from various industries. We had insight from first Abu Dhabi Bank. Ms. Ghazala told us about the journey. Then Mr. Ahmed Alrayyes, Vice President from DO, told us about his experiences, followed by Mr. Maytham Khairulla, VP Procurement and Business Support from OSN, how they took care of 900% increase in the viewership. And then Sulaiman Abdulla told about the experience in Telecommunications Regulatory Authority about even advancing the payment to suppliers. And last but not the least, we got the experience from Jaguar Landrover from Ms. Bernadette Rayan, and she told and emphasized more on the supplier relationship management and the collaborative approaches. Thank you very much for this productive session. I think we made most of the 50 minutes available to us, and it can go on, and there's a lot of potential. We had this much time slot, and I hope we made most of it, and our audience would have had many good practices noted down and the key takeaways from these particular sessions. Thank you. Appreciate your contribution. Thank you.